Mark J. Perry of the American Enterprise Institution may be the king of equality. And I'm saying that with a little smirk on my face because what Mark J. Perry has been doing very, very often, as well as some other people, is filing Title IX complaints against programs for women, interestingly. And I've interviewed Mark about this before. He's a very interesting fellow and he brings up very good points. The issue of Title IX, if you're not familiar, Title IX is often used in circumstances where a man is falsely accused by a woman of impropriety of some sort. And initially, Title IX is supposed to make sure there's no sexism at universities. And now it's used in many instances to say that if a woman doesn't get justice, that's discrimination against her. What ends up happening is we see the rise of a lot of programs where it's like women learn to code at the university or women's dance and things like this. Well, Mark Perry's opinion, and I could be wrong, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but my understanding based on the Title IX complaints is that making programs only for women violates Title IX as well because it's gender discriminatory. So there's apparently some updates that posted by the American Enterprise Institute. They say Title IX update, OCR opens investigations against Georgia Institute of Technology and Florida Institute of Technology. He writes, Mark writes, following my requests for review, the Atlanta Office for Civil Rights, OCR, has opened investigations against the following universities for offering, promoting, sponsoring, and hosting programs that I allege violate Title IX's prohibition on discrimination. He says, the first, Georgia Institute of Technology, is being investigated by the Atlanta OCR for these 10 discriminatory single-gender, female-only, no males allowed programs. So, before I read any more into this, go to timcast.com/donate. If you want to support my work, there is a monthly donation option. Cryptocurrency address says physical address. Sharing the video, liking, and commenting does a lot to help the video because the engagement is really, really good on YouTube. And subscribe if you haven't and you'd like to. So he says, first, Georgia Tech's Engineering Career Conference, ECC, is an annual discriminatory single-gender, girl-only, parentheses, no boys allowed program for junior and senior girls only. In high school, ECC is designed to give high school girls only information about the multiple engineering disciplines offered at Georgia Tech to help them decide if they'd like to study engineering in college. This is one of the big challenges we see in the equality debate. Men's rights activists typically point out things like this, and they would be and they would be correct to point out a girls-only program is sexist, period, and it's a violation of the law. Civil rights says, sex discrimination, not like only against women. However, for some reason, men's rights activists get heavily criticized for bringing these things up or challenging these notions, which is weird because that would imply they're not actually fighting for equality. They're fighting for exclusivity at the very least. Now, you might hear from some people, MRA, anti-CW, whatever, that it's female superiority or anything. Well, exclusivity. You can argue that if you want, but at least here we're talking about exclusivity. They say, Georgia Tech's Student Exploring Engineering C program is an annual discriminatory single-gender, girls-only, no boys allowed. It gets very specific. It's very analytical. Program for freshman and sophomore high school female students. C targets 100 freshman and sophomore high school female students only who have demonstrated aptitude and interest in STEM fields. Georgia Tech's Technology, Engineering, and Computing Tech Camp. Once again, you get the drift. He talks about annual single, yada, yada, yada. We'll read through some of these, though. Does he have, because I want to get to the bottom line update he has. So they've got an engineering, let's do this. They've got the Junior Tech Camp. Georgia Tech has the Engineering Career Conference. They've got the M&M Mentoring. Georgia Tech has Helen Grenga Outstanding Engineer Award. They have the Women in Engineering Faculty Awards. Women in Engineering Corporate Open House. He then goes to Florida International University. So I want to point out, this is a list of programs that presumably do violate Title IX in providing exclusive, like gender exclusive programs, and they're not supposed to be able to do that. So look, it's simple. Mark J. Perry is calling out this double standard. Florida International University is being investigated by the Atlanta OCR for the following Florida Tech Girls in Engineering, Mathematics, and Science GEMS Camp. He says it's an annual program that takes place every July. Eligibility for that gender exclusionary is restricted to female students only in grade 9 through 12th, and boys in grade 9 to 12 are excluded from this program. Therefore, in violation of Title IX. This exclusionary girl-only fit educational program does openly discriminate based on gender. Now here we have a quick legal review of Title IX. Title IX protects people from discrimination based on sex and education programs or activities that receive federal financial assistance. Title IX states, no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal finance assistance. Mark writes, in all cases above, it seems clear that some students on the basis of sex are excluded from participation in the programs, are denied the benefits of those programs, and C, are subjected to discrimination in all of those single-gender girl-only programs. The complaints request any of the following forms of relief deemed proper by the OCR. 1. The abolition of the gender discriminatory single-gender female-only no males allowed programs above within a reasonable period of time. 2. The conversion of the conversion of the single-gender girl-only programs above into gender-neutral, gender-inclusive, gender-blind programs within a reasonable period of time. 3. The creation of comparable single-gender all-male programs to offset the current gender favoritism for females and gender discrimination against males in the programs above in violation of Title IX. Now, here's an interesting point. If they opened it up to everybody, that's probably the best solution for one reason. And when I interviewed Mark Perry, it's been a while, but I'm pretty sure he brought up the point about transgender individuals, that these programs aren't just discriminating against males, they're discriminating against transgender individuals or gender non-binary individuals. In these instances, they're saying girl only. Well, what about a non-binary individual? Would the program restrict a non-binary individual? What about a biological male identifying as female? So Mark J. Perry is actually approaching this not from a men's rights point of view, but from a double standard social justice point of view. He brings up a really interesting point, which in the end will actually create, in my opinion, number 2 is the most amicable solution. But he does bring up a good point with number 3. Now, I think the abolition of these programs is a bad idea. There's probably a lot of, young women using these programs who like these programs, who like being with only women. This is an interesting conundrum. If women want to have a program only for women, should they be allowed to do it? If men want to have a program only for men, should they be allowed to do it? And this is one of the challenges. Publicly, under Title IX, probably not. But shouldn't they be free to? It's a tough question. It really is. But that's why I think another good solution is an alternative, a men's-only version of all of these things. But he says in the bottom line, it's very disappointing that as much as we hear from America's universities about their pious virtue-signaling commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and their alleged zero tolerance for any type of discrimination based on gender, that there are nonetheless so many universities that so openly practice gender uniformity, gender inequity, and gender exclusion in programs like the one identified above, and so openly discriminate based on gender in violation of Title IX. Now that my efforts have resulted in 7 universities being investigated for violating Title IX's prohibitions on discrimination, he says Michigan, Wayne State, Clemson, Brown, Rutger, Git, and Fit, with several dozen more complaints under review by OCR, let's hope the hypocritical double standard for selectively enforcing federal civil rights law in higher education will be successfully challenged and resolved. Question, or Q. I don't know what Q means. Aside from the fact that it's clearly illegal, under what moral code and under what set of ethical principles of fairness, justice, and equity has it become so acceptable to promote, fund, and sanction so much gender favoritism, bias, preferences, prejudice, and discrimination? And it's a good point. Another really good point to be made is, many people argue that women need these programs because they are a marginalized group. But I tell you, good sir or ma'am, that is not true anymore. Men are now the minority in colleges. Therefore, what we're seeing here is the majority gender in universities and colleges receiving programs to benefit them as they are already the majority group. Men have become the marginalized group at universities, not all of them, but many of them. In which case, based on the logic of the social justice groups, the intersectional feminists, they should absolutely call for these programs to be shut down and absolutely be calling for programs to increase the amount of males and men in general, into these universities. So no, In fact, you could successfully argue under the rules of intersectional feminism, these programs should be completely abolished, as he says in point 1, because they favor the majority. Meanwhile, men are dropping out. They're not even going. They are the marginalized group. So anyway, we'll see what happens. I'll cover some of this stuff every so often. I thought it was interesting that we're seeing more of these updates, and it brings up an interesting question about double standards, which you can comment to. I'm going to leave it there, but we got one more segment coming up. Actually, possibly some big news. So stick around. The segment will be up in a few minutes for those on the podcast. It is going to play shortly.